Welcome everyone. Welcome, we should be live from Lincoln. Let me know that you can hear me in the chat. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you guys are here. We are live. It is nearly 6:30 p.m. in Lincoln. And we've got about 10 minutes before it's officially time to start. So if any of you were watching the replay in the next few weeks or months or whenever, if you wanted to skip the hellos and go straight into the live walking tour, feel free to skip the next 10 minutes. Perfect. Thank you, Tish. And welcome, Sarah. Welcome, Mitzi. Hello again, Ronnie. Nice to see you guys. So we've got a few minutes before to start. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. I hope my gimbal is going to be okay. Just had a little episode when exactly what happened in Skegness a month ago. The power light was flashing for absolutely no reason. So finger crossed that the gimbal stays with us. And also, if anyone was completely new to me, this is a live stream. So we rely on the gods of the internet. So if you happen to have any micro cuts every so often, it could be that the signal dropped. Hopefully not. Hopefully we'll have a great signal. Hi Catherine, and welcome everyone. Sarah was asking how far. I don't know how far actually in miles or in kilometers, but it's gonna take me it's gonna take me forever to get home because I've got an hour of waiting in the middle of Nottinghamshire at Retford, I think it's called, but about 3 hours on the train basically. And yeah, 3.5 hours, but that's because I've got a long wait in the middle of nowhere. Good, thanks, good to know, Tish, and welcome David. Now, most of you know the drill already. I'm gonna have to tap the microphone 3 times just to check that it's working properly. And you tell me in the chat if you've heard 3 taps. If at any point through the tour you hear some funny noises or you hear the wind or anything, let me know in the chat. It could be the microphone that gets disconnected. And welcome Sandy, and welcome Emma. Nice to see you here. So we've got a few minutes before to start. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. You've heard it. Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mitzi. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tish. Right. You might be getting bored of my face with my messy hair. I didn't have a hairdryer all weekend, so that's why it looks like. Nini. So I'm going to flip the camera around so you can take a look at the view. And welcome, Shaz. If any of you was completely new to me, let us know in the chat. It's always great to see a few new names. And if any of you were watching this on replay and you're like, oh, what am I missing? I want to be in the chat with them. The best way not to miss the live, it's fine to watch the replay, but it's always more fun to be live with us. The best way, it's actually to click on the little, you'd have to subscribe first. That would help. And then you can click on the notification thing. So you should get a notification when I go live. And usually YouTube is quite good at adapting the notification. Let's say you don't like the shorts, but you want to join the lives. After a while, YouTube knows that you don't care for the shorts, but they hopefully still notify you when I go live. Although YouTube is doing some funny things these days. It's, I think they've been bombarded by an avalanche of content due to AI, and now it's very easy to create some AI slubs and stuff. So they're doing weird stuff with the algorithms, and they've started to demonetize a lot of people. Mainly people that do AI content, but still. So they're doing they're doing what they need to protect themselves really, but they're doing some weird stuff with the algorithms. So if you want to make sure you don't miss out on the next live, make sure you subscribe. They've also started another thing that I think could be quite bad. For the algorithms to like you now, they've added something called information gain, which I think can be a bit risky because basically if you don't bring anything new, AI is like checking what's on the internet already, what's on YouTube. And if you're just repeating information that has been told before, the algos are not going to push you. Fair enough. But that's actually pushing creators to have some fake information. Let's say if I do a video on Jack the Ripper, there are already thousands of videos on Jack the Ripper on the internet. So my video is not going to be pushed, right? Unless you make up some random crap. So I think eventually YouTube is going to regret that decision, because it's gonna lead to misinformation. If you have to come up with something new to get the algos to like you, you might as well make up something new. So just to let you know, I'm not planning on doing that. We'll stick to whatever I've learned. Although I can clearly make mistakes because, of course, all the stories I tell you, they're from my memory, really. So, of course, sometimes you can get things wrong or mixed up or whatever, that could happen. But I usually try to stick to what we know. And welcome, Herbie. Welcome, everyone. So we've got about 5 minutes to... you see my point? Yes. It's never made official. YouTube never explained the algorithms, but... or not officially at least, but it's fairly clear that it's what they're doing these days. And I can see why, especially because of AI. Now, especially on historical subjects, you don't have to do anything. You can have AI creating a full video. So you end up having dozens of videos on exactly the same subject, especially for historical content. So I can see why they're doing that, but it could lead to some funny things. Anyway, let's see what time it is. 3 minutes. 3 minutes before we officially kick off. And welcome, Jin Lee from Missouri. Nice to see you here. Welcome to Lincolnshire. We are in Lincoln by the castle. Now, as most of you know, I'm not from here. I've done my homework, of course, but I've only been here for the last 5 hours, so I don't know everything. Feel free to ask in the chat, though. If I know, I'll tell you. If I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. And Nikki is here. Nice to see you here, Nikki, and welcome everyone that I did not greet in the chat yet. We've got about 2 minutes to go. 2 minutes before we officially get started. Then we'll go for a little walk in Lincoln. Tish, I was in Skegness, so I was in Lincolnshire again for a job, and it's not really on my way home, but almost. So I was looking for a nice location to do a live, so I picked Lincoln this time. So I've been in Skegness since Friday. Same as usual, I go down to Skegness to take pictures of kids' football tournament. Exactly, we learn together. I've not been here for the full day. I've only arrived about 12 o'clock. So, and the weather just got much nicer. It was actually a bit cold earlier. Yes, you certainly benefit. Yeah, there'll be a long way from coming all the way from London to do a tour only, but it's almost on my way home. Why is this happening? And welcome, Alice. Nice to see you here. So we've got about 1 minute to go. 1 minute before it's officially time to start. It is indeed, Trista. I love it. It's very nice around here. Somehow it reminds me of Peterborough. There's no castle in Peterborough, but there's also a huge cathedral, a long high street going straight down to the river, and more modern bits by the river. So in terms of geography, it's quite similar. Nikki, probably should stop saying that, yeah. Yeah, the thing is AI is taking all over, and sometimes nowadays when the YouTube algorithm make mistake, you apply for a review, and then it's actually AI again reviewing everything, so you don't really... I mean, I've not had much problems with that, but I hear that some creators do. Right, let's see if it is time. Yes, it is officially 6:30. So welcome everyone, welcome to Lincoln. And without further ado, let me flip the camera around and let's go for a little walk. This is actually the castle wall there. This is the west gate. We'll get back to the castle in a moment. For now, let me show you this interesting building. This is here known as the Lawn. But this used to be an asylum, would you believe? That was a psychiatric institution until not that long ago, actually. 1985, maybe, I think it closed down. Now, it's an interesting site because for those of you that are regulars to my tours, you might know that we talked about asylums, especially in the 17th or 18th century. We talked about Bedlam, and those places were horrendous. They treated the people that were mentally ill very, very badly. They'll be locked into rooms and sometimes, attached with chains and naked in their own feces. I mean, some of the treatment was absolutely dreadful. But we had a doctor here, Francis Willis. He was actually revolutionary in terms of the treatment of mental illnesses. He was known for curing the Queen of Portugal had some problem with her mental health, and eventually he ended up treating the king here, King George III. You might know King George had some very big mental health issues himself, and Francis Willis actually treated him, and he was cured for the time being. Then he went back down into mental illness, but he was cured for a little while. Historians and doctors are still debating today what condition the king really suffered from. But that's the time when we had the regency. His son, the future George IV, had to take over the ruling of the country for the time being, because Daddy was unwell. And Francis Willis, you actually see him featured in the movie, The Madness of King George. Did you guys see the movie? Sorry.
Hi.
Hello. The Madness of King George, by the way, the creators of the movie wanted to call it the Madness of King George III. But they couldn't do that because they were worried that people abroad might look at the title and think that they've missed part 1 and 2, because of course it would look like The Madness of King George III. So yeah, apparently Francis is featured in the movie. Yeah, you've seen it, cool. Right, I wanted to start the tour around here so you could see the pub here, the Smuggler's Inn. Apparently that was once the site of public executions until the beginning of the 19th century, really. There were a few people that were executed here. Executions, that's always a good story before the execution. One of them was a guy called Thomas Cash, I think his name was. The crime was not committed here; it was committed in a little village in Lincolnshire. 1606, I think it was. He basically strangled his wife with his servant. Well, he's the one that committed the deeds, but the servant was there, and she was quite happy with it, to be honest, because she hoped that she'd be, because of the big secret the two of them had together, her employer and herself, maybe he would have to marry her eventually. Hi Tariq, hi Matthew, welcome everyone that just joined. And he did not marry her. Actually, he ended up marrying the neighbor, and the servant became jealous, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna tell the sheriff and all that." And then the Thomas Cash was like, "Yeah, you try, and who are they gonna believe between you and me? I'll just say that you've done it." So she never spoke, and eventually she moved on to London. She lived in Spitalfield, and apparently on her deathbed she confessed to her priest. But because the confession was not made at church, as it should usually be done, the priest decided that he was going to tell the authorities, that he wasn't breaking the secret of the confession if the confession was not made at church, and he actually told the authorities, and the guy got caught, and he was hanged here in front of the pub. There were also some witches that were hanged here. The Belvoir case, they were sisters at the beginning of the 17th century. Apparently they confessed that they had been responsible for witchcraft. They had been responsible for the fall of Henry Lord Rose, the Earl of Rutland or whatever. I don't know why they confessed. Officially, they've not been tortured, but why would you confess of such crime otherwise? And they were hanged here. Now, you might wonder, hanged? Witches? Why are they not burned? You know, we tend to think that they were burned, but actually, in this part of the country, in the 17th century, burning was no longer for witches. Well, or at least not here. They would have been burned in France or in Scotland, but here, burning was often for what they called petty crime, or what they called it's not petty crime. What do they call it? Petty treason. Yeah, petty treason. That's when you kill your husband. So would you believe for witchcraft you were hanged, but if you killed your husband, you'd be burned at the stake. I think that's a water reservoir, this one, the building here. So yeah, you had those witches. Now let's cross over. We ride by the castle walls, but the castle at this time is closed. Don't worry, I anticipated it. So I've got a little video of the inside of the castle. Let's stop here and I'll show you. It's a car park, but with a beautiful view. You can see the cathedral from here. And this is the cobbled. That's the site where they did the execution after 1818, because of the visibility. You know, you'd have thousands of people coming to watch those executions. So they did it up there on a little stage or whatever, so everyone could come and have a nice view. And but yeah, let's stop here and I'll show you the video of the inside of the castle. Now, as I play the video, you should still be able to hear me. If you don't, let me know in the chat, because I could have messed up the settings or anything. Right, let's go into the video. I filmed it earlier today. So that's the inside of the castle. So the castle was built by William the Conqueror, really, so it's nearly 1,000 years old. You don't see much of a castle today. This building here is part of the courthouse. So there was a court of justice for a long time. You can visit the castle. I didn't, because I didn't have time really. It's and you have to pay. I think it's £18 for an adult, but you can come into the ground. It was busy today because there was some kind of an event in Lincoln, a historical event with performers everywhere. So that's a little maquette there of the castle. So you've got the courthouse, you've got the former prison, a Georgian prison. And that's also where they have a copy of the Magna Carta. You know, the Magna Carta from the time of King John, the bad king in Robin Hood. They've got 4 copies. One is in Salisbury, one is here, one, I don't know what the two others are really, but that's one of the things you can come and see. So this is the former jail. Apparently one of the prison master was quite intimate with some of the ladies prisoners. He had a very bad reputation. Bad, it depends what you call bad, but it is said that he had fathered a few children, let's say, with some of the prisoners that were ladies. At the time, some of the prisoners, it was a bit of a debtor prison at some points, so you'd be jailed because of debts. His name is John Merriweather. He had a few bastards with the prisoners. And this is the back of the cobbled. The dragon is called Spike. It's a bit of a modern mascot of the city. It's not a historical legend or anything, but you see a few statuettes of spikes in the gift shops. I think it's just meant to promote the city. And here is George III. He was not actually commissioned to be placed here. He was meant to be on some kind of an obscure column somewhere, but eventually they took the column down because they thought it was going to be too high for the planes. So it's a bit ridiculous, but that's how we ended up here. Hi Sandrine, and welcome everyone that just joined. So we're watching a little video at the moment, but soon we'll go back into the walk. So yeah, lovely place to come and chill. And again, today it was particularly busy because of a historical event, but it's probably not always like that. I think they've got some concerts sometimes in the summer in the evening. So today it's closed at 5, but sometimes when they have events in the evening, they could leave it open a bit longer. You can walk on the rampart. That's ticketed as well. So when you go and visit the castle, you can do the walk up there. It's probably quite nice to see it from above. And I think that's going to be the end of the video soon. So this is the back of the Cobb Hall. That's where they did a lot of public executions. The last one was in 1859. That was 2 young men. That was Carey and Pickett. They were a bit silly criminals. What they'd done is they'd been to a pub, not here, it was in a village in I think next to Louth, and they decided to rob an old man. The guy had a few shillings in his pockets, but that was it. And they followed him home, and they ended up welcome, she who must be loved. And they killed him. And stupidly, the next morning they went back to the pub. They still had like blood spats on their outfits, so that was quite easy to catch them. And that was the last public execution up here on the Cobb Hall, because after that, in 1868 they decided to do those executions inside of the prisons for public decency, because they thought it was too much of a show. Oh, you were last here in 86. Well, you'll tell me if it's changed a lot. Anyway, so we're back on the street now. This is the other side of the Cobb Hall. So the last execution here was 1859, as we mentioned. And it's quite a dramatic sky. Look at the light, that's beautiful. After that, they did the executions inside of the prison. The first lady in the country, actually, that was executed indoor, that was Priscilla Biggerdyke. That's a cool name, Biggerdyke. I don't even remember how you spell it, but it sounds like a fat lesbian, Biggerdyke. She was, well, you know what, actually, I'll probably tell you the full story when we go down to Boston, because she lived near there. She was basically married, but her marriage wasn't going very well. She had kids and everything, and she had a lodger, John Prompter, and her husband died quite quickly, and they suspected foul play. They did the autopsy. His body contained arsenic, and she was accused and she was convicted and executed. When many years later, on his deathbed, the lodger and Biggerdyke had a bit of a close friendship. There might have been an affair there, but anyway, on his deathbed, he actually allegedly confessed that he had done it. He had poisoned the husband, and he let Biggerdyke go to the gallows for nothing really. It is also here at Lincoln Castle that there was a guy, executioner Marwood, is the one that experimented with the long drop. Before that, people were hanged with a short drop, and they would struggle for a while, minutes sometimes, and you might be lucky if you had a friend in the audience that could pull your leg, to make it a bit quicker for you. And Marwood experimented with the long drop, and is the one that really kind of tested the technique, and then it became standard practice, because the long drop with the drop itself, it breaks your neck, so you wouldn't be, it was meant to be a bit more, a bit nicer, let's say, to the prisoners. Now, down that way we'll go down towards a steep hill, but not quite yet. Let's go and take a look at the cathedral first. Now, about the execution, there's one other gentleman I didn't tell you about that was hanged at the castle. It is Tom Otter in 1805. Otter is a very interesting criminal or a murderer, because he's got a lane named after him. Let me show you. See on the map, so that's a bit outside of Lincoln. It's in close to Salisbury. See Tom Otter's Lane? I think that's the only street ever, I mean, correct me if you know any others, but since when do we have streets named after a murderer? It's almost like if we were glorifying it, you know. Well, I know we had a pub named after Jack the Ripper, but that's different. It's still called Tom Otter's Lane today. I'll tell you why. Tom was actually living under a fake name here in Lincoln. He had a wife and kids in Nottingham. I think he was actually called Tompoler or something like that. But anyway, no one here knew he was married, and he started to see a young girl called Mary Kirkham, and she fell pregnant. And at the time, apparently the parish could kind of push people to get married, because they didn't want too many little bastards, because then those ladies might end up on the poor reliefs, you know, so they didn't want you know, once they were married, the responsibility of taking care of the child was the father's, really. So he was pushed into getting married, and the very day they got married, well, the next morning, he went for a walk with Mary. She was like 8 months pregnant, and he brutally murdered her. He was almost certainly guilty, because he was found with blood spots on himself, and he was still wearing his wedding outfit. Now, the murder, it's very sad, especially that it's almost like a double murder, you know, because she was almost giving birth. What's a bit unusual is that he was meant to be hanged and then dissected. You know, we talked about that before at the time, when you were, because there was a great demand for human bodies. So at the time, very often your body would be given to science. And at the last minute, they decided not to dissect him, but to gibbet him. Gibbeting, or gibbetting, some people say, but they're just weird. It's a gibbet. A gibbet is a French word, so if it was meant to be told gibbet, you'd have a U in there. So he was gibbeted on what is now called Tom Otter's Lane, and his body was kept in the gibbet. If any of you do not know what a gibbet is, it's basically some form of a metal cage. And they put the body to hot up there as a deterrent, you know, so people would not commit the same type of crime. But usually it's only for a few years. Tom Otter's body stayed up there for 44 years, would you believe? The gibbet eventually fell down in 1850. And part of the gibbet actually was, they still expose it somewhere. It was at the castle for a few months, but it's in another museum at the moment. Now, not only does he have a lane named after him, but there was also a little rhyme, because what happened is some bird nested in his skull when he was in the gibbet. So there was a full family of birds living inside. So the little rhyme goes: 9 tongues within the head, the 10th went out to seek some bread, to feed the living within the dead. So that's the legacy of this horrible murderer. Although I don't know how I feel about a street named after a murderer. It seems like a great honor that he shouldn't have, but hey ho, after all, it's not even his real name, so who cares? Now, let me show you the cathedral. It is, well, they started to build it at the time of the Normans, you know. It is a great example. Ooh, we've got some beautiful cars. What are they doing here? I want the pink one, please. Now, cathedral first. It is a beautiful building. It's at some point it was the tallest building in the country, but it used to be a bit taller than it is now. They reduced a bit the spire. And actually, there was a fire as well in the Great Fire of the Spire. Hi, Sarah, and welcome everyone that just joined. Now, let's go and take a quick look at the carvings, because they're really cool. I think some of them have quite obviously been redone, but look at those devils. Those probably refer to the Lincoln imp. There's a little story of a devil here. It is said that, let me zoom in a bit so you see a bit better all those carvings. It is said, it is said that when they were building the church, Satan himself, the devil, sent two little imps down here. They were, well, not only here, across the country, really, but they were causing carnage everywhere. They would break windows and all that. And eventually an angel, as they were trying to destroy the cathedral, an angel turned up. And one imp got scared and ran away. And the other one was frozen into the stone here. He's got a little stone statue inside of the cathedral. But it's quite hard to spot the imp because he's a bit hidden away. You can go visit the cathedral as well. I didn't because it's ticketed, and again, I didn't have time to do much. I had to work on my route. But look at those carvings, aren't they amazing? Look at this. They certainly, I mean, they've been redone, but I'm guessing they try to follow the original patterns. Maybe not, I don't know. But look at the amount of work. And of course, on this level, we can see very well, but there's some more higher up as well. Now, there's an amazing lady, or fascinating lady, that's buried here. She actually got married here in the cathedral. It is Catherine Swynford. You might not have heard of her. I think they really should do a movie about her. I should pitch the idea to BBC or Netflix or whatever. Sorry, thank you. And so yeah, Catherine, she was a lady from around here, and she's actually an ancestor of all our monarchs to this day. All our monarchs since Henry VII, really. So she's a very interesting lady, because we tend to forget, but the Tudor dynasty was actually founded on an illegitimate love affair. You want the blue one, Sarah? Okay, I'll put in an offer if you want. Tell me how much you've got to spare. I think I prefer the pink one because it's pink and it's rare. Blue it's everywhere. Now let me give you another view of the cathedral and we'll make a move. So yeah, Catherine Swynford, she was a lady. We are in the 14th century. She was married to a knight. His name was he was Swynford. That was his name. He at the time that was the time of the when they kept fighting France all the time, with the 100 Years' War and everything. So he was often fighting in France, and he actually died in France. His death was a little bit suspicious. Some have claimed that he might have been poisoned. Anyway, she ended up being a widow, and she had some kids, and she was a widow. So the Lancaster family gave her a job. So that was the Duke of Lancaster, John of Gaunt. So she was working for John's second wife, Constance. John of Gaunt was the brother of the king. He was the brother of Richard the Second. Now, before we go much further, let me show you some weird street art. This is so proper weird. I don't know who's done that, but they've glued some kind of little target thing here. But this is such a historical building. I mean, you'd think they should be told off or caught for such weird art. I don't even know what it represents. Now we've got another view of the castle down here. So that's the castle walls. And let me show you another little gargoyle. Well, I don't think you can call. I think gargoyles. It's only a gargoyle if they have water coming out of their mouth or of their body. This one's clearly been redone because it looks very fresh. But look at that. That's quite cool. I don't know what you call them when they're not gargoyles. Just statuettes, I guess. You can see it's been redone because if you look at the next one, it's massively damaged, you know, compared to that one. Oops, sorry, I made a mess again. Every time I zoom in, I make a mess. There we go. I don't even think he's the Lincoln imp because I don't see a devilish tail, but maybe, who knows? Right, so yeah, let's get back to Catherine. So she's a widow. She now works for the king's brother in his family. She's like a lady in waiting for Constance. The Duke of Lancaster had already been married to a lady called Blanche. He had kids with her. Then he married Constance. She was actually from the Spanish aristocracy. She actually had a claim to the throne of Castile. That's probably why he married her, because of course he wanted to become the King of Castile himself, you know. And before we go much further, let me show you the post box. Some of you might know I like my post boxes, and see this one, it is gold. That's quite rare. You only get a box painted in a gold color if you have an athlete in your town or in your village that has won a gold medal at the Olympics. So if we get a bit closer, you'll see this is for Sophie Wales. She was an, I cannot say it, equestrian. And you see that's quite an old box because it says VR for Victoria Regina. And yeah, we can. We've got one in Westminster, right in front of Westminster Abbey, but that's the prototype. The one in Westminster is not for one particular athlete. Now let's keep going. And so this is the other side of the castle walls. And this is the tourist information building. It looks very much like it's 16th century as well. Now, back to Catherine. So she's working for Constance, she's working for the Duke. We don't know when exactly, but it's quite clear that about that time she started to have an affair with the Duke. So she's having an affair with the Duke of Lancaster, which is the brother of the king. And they had 4 children in total. They were known as the Beaufort bastards. Beaufort after a property in France that belonged to the Duke. And the 14th century was a crazy moment, and you know, you had the peasants' revolt in London, so people were complaining against some aristocrats, and after that, because it looked very bad for him to have an affair, especially with someone like her that was not of his rank, he decided to stop seeing Catherine. So they broke up. She stayed here in Lincolnshire and in this area. Now this building used to be a pub. Look at this Widow Cullen's Well. I was unable to find the story behind the name. It's no longer a pub today, but you can see it used to be a pub. But it looks like there might have been an interesting story there. Now, back to Catherine. So, can you hear the bells behind me? That's the bells of the cathedral. Anyway, back to Catherine. She's a widow, she's got her 4 boys, and eventually the Duke and Constance, they started to live apart. And she died. Constance died. Would you believe then the Duke decided to marry Catherine, his old-time mistress, which is very unusual because obviously she wasn't from the same type of aristocratic family, and of course they had already ended up their affair, so they married. So you can see sometimes even in this time in history you can find some good love stories that survived. And then I think that's a boundary marker maybe here. I like those old boundary markers. I didn't notice that earlier, but yeah. Anyway, he married Catherine and he decided to get a papal benediction or whatever you call it. So basically, his 4 bastards were now made legitimate. But at that point, so Richard II had died, and the next in line was, eventually it was going to be John of Gaunt's son, with the first one with Blanche. And one of the part of the deal was that those 4 bastards could inherit on everything, but they could not have a claim to the throne. Well, they didn't personally, but their descendant did. Henry VII, King Henry VIII's dad, when he came back from Brittany, he was actually part of the Lancaster line. He was actually the descendant, the great-grandson of Catherine and John of Gaunt. And of course, we know the Tudor dynasty. I mean, we can trace all our kings from there. Not straight, because of course we had James VI of Scotland and the first of England. But would you believe he was also a descendant of Catherine and John of Gaunt? Because Catherine's granddaughter Joan had married James I of Scotland. So basically, it is a beautiful love story of illegitimate children that gave birth to the Tudor dynasty. And they got married here in Lincoln Cathedral. Hello, hello, One Tech Adventure, and welcome everyone that just joined. No, Jin Lee, I think traffic is allowed on most of the streets, but not right here, not in the city center. They might be allowed in the morning for deliveries and stuff, but earlier in the afternoon it seemed... Well, it's hard to tell because it's a bank holiday today, so you don't have much traffic anyway. But yeah, I think Steep Hill is probably pedestrianized, yeah. At least I didn't see any cars today. Now, let me show you this beautiful building. This is known as the Norman House. We've got some very rare buildings here that actually dates back to Norman times. And we do have a lot of surviving Normans building in the country, but in terms of domestic buildings, we don't have that many. So it's amazing that they've survived that long, really. Let me show you. This one is a tea shop. And we were talking about the Lincoln imp earlier. This is the Lincoln imp. That's actually a representation of the one in the cathedral. 50 Shades of Earl Grey. I like my Earl Grey. I should have bought some tea. I'm not sure I would taste the difference though. But that's a cool design. Now let's go down Steep Hill. So this is Steep Hill, and you'd see it's quite steep. That's why it's called Steep Hill. The street is very old. You've got a lot of beautiful buildings. Some of them are Norman. This one here, I think it's 14th century, this one maybe 15. It was a pub or an inn called the Harlequin because it was linked to the oldest theatre here. It was like the inn that would go with the theatre. I don't think there's much inside at the moment. Are you drinking Earl Grey right now? Cool. I like my Earl Grey myself. Especially on the days when I'm doing tours. I don't really drink coffee when I'm doing tours because I feel like it dries out my voice. And you know, I already have a strong accent, so I need to be clear and articulate. So usually when I'm working, I drink tea or yerba mate or whatever it might be. Look at those buildings, isn't that cool? You've got some base that looks almost like it could be Norman as well. And it looks a bit Jacobean at the top. Now, let's go down to tell you about some murders. It's much quieter than it was a few hours ago. A few hours ago it was packed. But there was a little event today. There was a little like historical event. Actually, let me show you a little video while we're here. I didn't do much filming because there were kids everywhere. And you know, I don't want to put kids on camera, but let me show you what it looked like. You had some kind of old historical market with some olds. You could go and pet an old. This is Sunbeam, and people would explain about the olds and I cannot say it properly. Olds, and you could do archery. Great event for the kids. Really, I didn't know it was on. It was just completely random. You had a lot of things explaining you about all the Middle Age stuff, and the Danes as well. We are now entering Danesgate. When you see those streets that are called gate, it's not about a gate like a door. It's after gata. That was the Viking, the Danish term for street, really. You like the way I say it? I did go into a charity shop one, and there was a French guy that was trying to ask for. He had seen an owl in the window a few days earlier. And he was trying to. That was so funny because he was like, "Hey, I want the owl. I want the owl. You know, the bird, owl." And the lady couldn't get it. It was so funny. Anyway, so that was the type of event that was on today. Now, this is Steep Hill. We'll get back down there in a moment. You can see it's quite steep. I've actually gone down twice and up twice today already. But let's go down Danesgate because there's an interesting murder site. Well, as usual, you know, I'm not going to stay too long in front of the murder house because if you live in a murder house and you don't know, you probably don't want to know. So I'll show you the buildings quickly, but I'll make a swift move. Now, the murder in that house, that was in Victorian times. It was actually a quarrel between two neighbors. You know, people have they've always been fighting with their neighbors. You know, it's a classic woo today. I mean, I'm sure I don't know anyone that never had any type of argument with their neighbors, but usually it doesn't end up in murder. In the case of number 47, Danesgate, it did. You had a guy called Chris Baker at number 47. He was a bit of an eccentric. He had, his wife had died, and he had taken a lodger, a young man called Chrissy, and his niece was working for him as some kind of a servant. His niece was Miss Wilkinson, not to be confused with his neighbor that was also called Mrs. Wilkinson, not connected at all. So it's a bit confusing, but let's call the neighbor Lucy, so we don't get confused. Now, so there's this young niece of his that lives here with his lodger, Chrissy, and apparently he had tried to do some stuff that were improper to his young niece. We don't know more detail, but you can imagine. And Chrissy found it unacceptable, and he actually confronted Baker. So those are the houses. So Baker lived at number 47 right here, and the neighbors, Mrs. Wilkinson, was at number 45. Now, it might be a murder house, but they have amazing door knockers. Let me show you. This one, I'm going to have to say it again. This one is clearly an owl. And let me show you the other one. The other one, I don't even know what it is. If it's some kind of like a puma or some kind. Oh, it's a wolf. No, it's got a pink. No, it could even be a fox. Who knows? It's probably a wolf. But yeah, amazing door knockers. Anyway, back to the story. So Baker was furious at his lodger that confronted him about the sexual assault or whatever it was. So the lodger moved. He moved out from number 47 to number 45 to Mrs. Wilkinson, and the young niece, she moved away. She's no longer part of the story. And from that day, Baker went ballistic. He was always fighting with Chrissy. Mrs. Wilkinson, she lived with her son Charles, and then the neighbor started to be rude to Mrs. Wilkinson as well. And one night, someone was banging at the door down here at number 45. Mrs. Wilkinson did not open. The next morning, she's in the garden, she's cutting flowers or whatever she's doing in the garden, and the neighbor is shouting over the wall, "I want to see Chrissy, I need to see Chrissy." And it was very early morning, so she was like, "No, he's sleeping, you leave him alone." And he was like, "Yeah, I want to see Chrissy, he's tarnished my good name." Mrs. Wilkinson had already called the police a few weeks earlier on the neighbor, so that's why he was furious. And apparently, he jumped over the wall from number 47 to 45. He actually fired at Mrs. Wilkinson, but she didn't die. She survived, luckily. Then he went inside and he went to kill Chrissy. Then he went back to his bedroom, so back to next door, and he was at the window when the police was called, and he was threatening to unalive himself. So the police officers are on the street, they're chatting to him, they're like, "No, don't do this, it's not gonna help." And one police officer, Mr. Cole, actually, Inspector Cole? Well, Constable Cole or whatever he was, he actually found a ladder and he climbed through the back, and he was able to come in through the back bedroom, and then he could stop him. So he managed to stop Baker, and he look at the pillars there. They are done from the Beaver Lincoln foundry, so they are locally made. So yeah, eventually Baker was caught and hanged, of course. The interesting bit is that the same police officer, Cole, he was 8 years later involved in another case, I'll tell you the story in a moment, where he also managed to find a ladder and enter a bedroom from the window. So he was a lad that was good with ladders. Now let's get back into Steep Hill. Yes, exactly, Jenny, a nasty neighbor. But who never had a nasty neighbor? I think we've all had some at some point. Maybe not that nasty, but I think a lot of people have issues with their neighbors. Right, you might already be able to spot a beautiful building across the street that is known as Jew's House. It is after the Jewish community. There used to be quite a big Jewish community here in Lincoln. A lot of people from the Jewish community actually came with William the Conqueror, and they were doing loans, money loans, like the banks do today, really. So of course, when you deal with money, you always get jealousy, And historically, the Jews have always been accused of the most random things, and there's a couple of tales associated with this building. They were evicted, in when was it, 1290? And then actually when they came back to the city in the 17th century, some of the Jewish community gathered here for ceremonies or meetings and stuff. So it is, this one to the right is Jew's Court, and this one is Jew's House. It's very much, again, a Norman building that is a residential building today, so it's amazing how well preserved it is. Oh, thank you, Christopher, that's very much appreciated. Anyone able to contribute with your tips, that really, really helps. Now, there's a couple of dark stories. There's one in particular dark story that's associated with the Jew's House. I'm going to be careful with my vocabulary here because I don't want the YouTube algorithms targeting or flagging the wrong thing. But little disclaimer, I don't think it's a true story. I think it was pretty much created to smear up some anti-Semitism in the area in the 13th century before they expelled the Jews. But there's... the story is probably true, but the outcome is probably not. There was a little boy in the 13th century, that disappeared here. Little Hugh. He was playing on the streets in the summer in July, and he was not seen ever again for a month. And it is said that there's a local priest, Father Lixwington, I think, something like that. He asked the other local boys, and the boys said, "Oh, we saw him following the the Jewish man," and eventually they caught a poor Jewish guy, and they accused him, and they found. It is said that they found the body of the little Hugh in a well, and that the guy confessed. Well, they probably tortured him, if it is even true. But that created outrage in the area, and that pushed again more persecution of the Jewish community in this area. Is probably completely innocent. If he ever existed, it might have even been a little tale that was exaggerated over the years to give the Jews a bad reputation. And even if it was true, no confession at the time should ever be taken seriously, because obviously when you torture people, they do confess, There's another story, another person associated with Jew's house. There was a lady that was accused of doing counterfeit money. Again, they've always been accused of any random stuff. And thank you, Janie. The lady, she was allegedly owning the building at some point, and she had a weird name. She was called Balacet of Willingford, and it is after that Henry III persecuted them, and so it's this type of stories or maybe fake allegations that contributed to the anti-Semitism really in the 13th century, and it's hard to tell nowadays if there was any basis of truth behind any of those stories, but probably not. It was probably just to smear up some drama. Now, this beautiful building here, it's the Cardinal's hat. You might see the name. It's after Cardinal Wolsey. He was, of course, the guy that became the right-hand man of King Henry VIII. He was his best friend forever. Well, not really forever in that case. And he used to be the Bishop of Lincoln, so that's why. There's there's a lady we talked about before in my tour that died here in Lincoln. Queen Eleanor of Castile. She, we talked about the Charing Cross in London. What happened is when she died, Eleanor, she was the wife of Edward I, I think, or Edward III. No, Edward I, so I don't say anything wrong. They were together, they loved each other. Edward never took a mistress. Imagine a king that never took a mistress. And when she died, he was of course extremely sad, and as they brought the body down to Westminster Abbey, they erected a cross at every single spot where they spent a night. The last one being the Charing Cross in London. Not many of them survived because a lot of them were destroyed through the Civil War and all that. Anyway, we are no longer on Steep Hill, we're now on High Street. It's not as steep anymore, and it's gonna slowly get a little bit more modern, although we still have some very old building down there. Now, there was another murder here, a terrible case on High Street. It was the case of Sarah Clark. Sarah was from a family from Lincoln. She lived with her parents, and they had taken in a lodger, Joseph Clark, and they fancied each other. Sarah got pregnant, so the parents were, of course, trying to avoid the shame, and they kind of forced them to marry. So Sarah and young Joseph got married. They took a lodging down here on, at first they had a lodging on Steep Hill behind me. And, hello. And they were happy at first. Then he took a job as a laborer. It was quite hard to find a job at the time, so he took a job outside of town, and he would have his lodging down there. And one day he received a letter saying, "I'm leaving you, I'm off." So he ran back to Lincoln to confront her. She was already gone. She had gone to Bradford to another man. And 8 months later, she sent him a letter begging him to take her back. And he did. He accepted her back. They had a couple of babies. They lived okay for a few years. When they decided to take in a lodger. And guess what? She started to have an affair with the lodger. She decided to leave Joseph again, to go with the lodger down to Gravesend. You might remember Gravesend, that's where we went for my Pocahontas tour. And a few months later, she comes back. Well, about 8 months again, she comes back pregnant. And she begs him to take her back. And would you believe, he did. So he took her back with the baby from another. So they now have 4 babies, 4 little ones. When, guess what? She decides to leave him again. Yes, Sarah, a lot of the buildings are protected for their inheritance, for their heritage. And so yes, he decides to take her once again. And I mean, she leaves him once again, and then she fell pregnant again. Yeah, he did, honey. So 3 times now he's taken her back. And then she had another baby, and then it looks like it's now the other guy, the guy in Gravesend, that decides to leave her. She found herself, poor Joseph, he had kept the other babies, so he was living here with his kids, and she came back from Gravesend. Well, first she sent him a letter from Gravesend saying, I promise I'll never leave you again, let me come back, I'll never leave you again. And at first he sends a letter and he says yes. Would you believe, for the 4th time now? And he actually then changed his mind. He had taken a nanny for the kids because he had all the kids to care for. And the nanny was very nice, and he actually started a love affair with the nanny. And she probably convinced him to say no. But Sarah Clark was not going to take no for an answer. She actually left Gravesend. She had nowhere to go anyway, because at the time, you know, when you were a lady, your money was not yours, your money was your husband's anyway. So it was very difficult, you know, not trying to defend her, but it was very difficult at the time for a lady to supply for her kids, you know, if she didn't have a man. And he says no, but she decides to come back anyway. The quickest way would have been to take a train to London and back up, but that would have been very expensive. So she actually boarded a ship to Hull, then crossed over the water to go down to Wimby, and then down here. She probably found him at his workplace, and well, as far as we know, he rejected her. He stood to his position. He was like, "No, you're on your own. You've left me too many times. I can't do that anymore. I've got someone, you know." And she was destitute. You know, she had no other option. She apparently checked into a cafe down here, a cafe that was offering some bedrooms to rent as well. I don't know which one, but somewhere down here on High Street. The landlady was Mrs. Doncaster. So she checked in upstairs with her 2 kids, well, 1 toddler and 1 newborn. And she didn't pay quite yet. She said she was going to have the money the next day because her husband in Bradford was going to pay her and blah, blah, blah. And she probably did try to go back to Joseph again, but he's probably turned her down again. And the next day, she asked the landlady if she could send her son or someone to go and pick up a luggage at the station, at the train station. So they did. Someone went to pick her luggage, and she left. She was like, "Oh, can you take care of the little ones? I'm gonna go down somewhere." She actually went to sell some items of clothing. She came back with some money to pay the landlady. And the next morning, no one would come out of the bedroom. Now, little pause in the story. This is the Guildhall house. This is Well, this building I think is 16th century, but the original is 13th century, so that would have been the Guildhall. Now, back to the story. Yeah, the next morning, no one is coming out of the bedroom, and the Mrs. Doncaster's daughter believed she could hear a child crying. So they're knocking at the door, they're looking at the door, they're like, Mrs. Clark, no answers. Eventually, they decided to try to climb and look over the window, and the daughter, the landlady's daughter, was like, oh, I think something terrible has happened. They went to fetch a police officer, the same as earlier, Constable Cole, and Constable Cole grabbed a ladder and he was able to look through the window. They could see the bodies laying down. They had taken laudanum. So that's an opioid drug that was quite popular at the time in Victorian times. Now, the kids could not be revived. They had an overdose of laudanum. Sarah did survive. Now, it wasn't completely unusual to give laudanum to kids. Some people did to calm them down in very small quantities. I mean, today we'll find it horrific to give opium to your kids, but would you believe in Victorian times some people did. But at 4 a.m. in the morning, that's a bit unusual as well. It does look like, she found herself completely destitute. All she could live on was the poor relief, from the workhouses and stuff. And she probably did decide to take their life and then her own, but she maybe didn't take enough for herself. They found 3 little bottles of laudanum. She'd bought them in different pharmacies. You could buy it at the pharmacy, but you had to sign in the poison books and everything when you bought stuff, or the quantities were restricted. But when you went to different pharmacies, different chemists, different books. Now, would you believe her lawyer actually tried to claim that it was an accident, that she wanted to take her own life, but she wanted the kids to be quiet. And the judge was actually quite clement with her. She had only 18 months of hard labor for a double murder. Did you see Hotel Chocolat? I didn't see. Oh yes, I saw Hotel Chocolat. There was also a chocolaterie earlier. Now, this beautiful building here, it is, it's called Highbridge House. That's also from the 16th century. Beautiful building. It's a little coffee today. But would you believe this is a bridge? We are actually on a bridge right now. You can see on the, it's actually one of the oldest bridges in this area, but if I went down this way, I'll go down to the river. And let's do just that. Let's go and see the river. It's you could actually walk down the street and not even realize you are on a bridge, but I'll show you. The river is here. It's like a hidden river. You wouldn't notice it's here if you didn't know, but yeah, it is right here. So this is the River Witham. And let's go a bit further down, because there's a nice sculpture down there. So I'll show you the view with the sculpture on the bridge in the background. It's so much quieter. It's funny how it was buzzing with people from the historical event earlier, and you had kids everywhere and families coming for the bank holiday Monday, and out of the space of an hour and a half when the shop closed, suddenly it became very quiet and quite nice, really. It's better, because I was a bit worried that the signal might go down, when it's too busy. You have a lot of people stealing my signal. By the way, the Sarah Clark inquest, I'll show you where we finished the tour. I'll show you where it was done, in a former pub as well, which is no longer a pub. Nowadays it's a Chinese restaurant. And this is a little food market down here. The cornhole. I think the market is quite modern, this one, but that's the site of the corn exchange. Now let's cross over the river. It's this sculpture here that's quite nice, but from here it doesn't, I was going to say it doesn't look like much. Yeah, it's quite cool from here as well, but when you are on the bridge it looks even better. It's people kind of trying to, well, silhouettes trying to hug maybe, or hold hands, or just reaching for one another. But let's go on the bridge, it's going to be much better. Oh, that's a nice flower bike. You have a few people on the barges as well. Well, technically, I think those are canal boats, but this is not a canal, this is a river, I think. That's a cool name. We were talking about pub's name earlier. That's a nice one as well. I don't know if there's a story behind it, but the Witch on Wardrobe. They have a lot of cool pubs around here. I should come back to go down to the pubs. Well, I did go to Wetherspoons earlier, but only for a tea, so that doesn't count. Now you can see some people have placed their love locks. So it's always the same system. You bring a love lock with you and your lover, and then you drop the key in the river, so you cannot ever open it again. Now, let me show you the view. So that's the shot with the statue. Even the reflection of the statue on the river is beautiful. Look at that. And with the bridge in the distance, it's quite cool. Amazing art installation. I don't know if it's quite recent. I should have checked really. It looked fairly modern to me, but maybe not as modern as we'd imagine. Right, let's go down this way towards the Cornhill Quarter. On the square here, there were some Danes reenactment actors having a fight, and I didn't enjoy much of the thing because I was planning my route and everything, but there were some cool historical reenactments on market stalls and everything today. Quite a cool event. We should do a pub crawl, yes. If you all want to jump on a plane to come and meet us here, we should have a nice pub crawl. Well, maybe in London more than here. Well, we could come here, but we were talking about the I was going to say the Skegness Imp. It's not Skegness, it's the Lincoln Imp. But I did a kids football tournament this weekend, and there's a team in Skegness called the Skegness Imp, because the local club is the Lincoln City. They have the imp as a logo, really. So that's from their local football club. So you can see the imp everywhere. So that's the same imp as we mentioned earlier at the cathedral. You can even get some sweets with the imp. I think I pronounce it wrong as well. Every time I say imp, it's like I'm adding an H in there that's not there. But that's the thing with French people. We skip a lot of H, and sometimes we invent some as well when there's no H at all. That's a cool name for a brand. Jailhouse Frock. I like the little illustration up there. Now, let's get back towards the high street. That's a nice... Oh, there's another imp up there above the kids. I'll show you. In the little, I think that's basically the entrance to the car park. But look up there. There's an imp behind the windows. Right now, to get back to the old town and the castle. The castle here in Lincoln was also very much involved in the, it's a civil war that was called the Anarchy. We talked about that very briefly when we were in Woolpit a few months ago. Basically, we had Matilda that should have been the queen, and King Stephen that were fighting for the throne. To give you the context again, what happened is William the Conqueror, his son became king, so that was Henry I. And he had a lot of illegitimate boys, but the one that was legitimate, he died. So that was Matilda's brother. He died crossing over the channel. They were too drunk to jump on a boat, and they all died. So Henry lost his heir. His only surviving one was Matilda. But at that point, welcomed in. At that point, we had not had a lady on the throne yet. A lady queen in her own right. So Matilda should have been queen, but when her dad died, she was actually in France and she was pregnant. And she had married, technically she had married a Plantagenet. That's how we got the name for the dynasty. She was pregnant, so she couldn't get here quite soon enough. And her cousin usurpated the throne, calling himself King Stephen. And there was a war between Matilda and Stephen, because she was the legitimate heir because her father had said so, and some part of the country supported Matilda. That was the case at the castle here. At that point, the castle was still part of the. It was still a royal place, because later on we had, Richard the Lionheart, or Richard Cœur de Lion, I should say, because Richard the Lionheart, also, although he was the king of the country, he didn't speak a word of English. He spent all his time in France, and he spent less than 6 months of his life in the country. But Richard the Lionheart, he actually kind of neglected the country, and one of his mates actually sold the castle to a private landowner. Now back to Matilda. The castle was actually supported by supporters of Matilda at the time, and King Stephen tried to take the castle a few times, very, very cheekily. The first time, he sent two brothers. They turned up when a lot of the garrison was actually, the soldiers were actually hunting, and they came unarmed. They just came for a visit, and then they were like, talking to the ladies, we'll escort you back and stuff. And then they had their mates that were hiding with their swords and everything. They attacked, but very quickly the castle was taken back by Matilda's allies. And then they tried again a few months later. They tried to go under the ramparts, so they tried to sneak under the castle walls, and then their plan was to break up the rampart with a lot of burning fat, pig fat. But the thing is, there was an explosion, and they actually killed 80 of their men. So they didn't succeed to take the castle. And eventually Stephen was captured, and he was locked in Bristol. We're going back to Bristol, by the way, next Monday. So if you fancy a live stream in Bristol, make sure you go and hit the little notification bell. Now, the castle was never fully taken by Stephen. He ended up being king, though, because although Matilda was kind of winning at some point, people in London did not support her. They were not ready to have a lady on the throne. So eventually they chose King Stephen. But he lost eventually, because it's Matilda's son that ended up taking the throne after Stephen. And Matilda's son was the first one of the Plantagenets, because of his dad. Oops. Shouldn't be crossing, but I just did. This little graveyard earlier, see, I've shown you the video of the owls. That's where you had all the owls, and you could come and pet an owl on the graves. Actually, you can probably see you've got some bird poo on the graves there. That's probably from the owls. Now, this is the train station here. That's where I'll come and jump on my train in about half an hour, I think. Maybe more, maybe 40 minutes. So that's Lincoln Central. Down that way. And that's an EMR train. I think I recognize the color down there. Well, I'm not exactly a train spotter, but I can see because that's the company I use today, really. And let's go down. I told you I would show you the pub that was used to do the inquest. Now, there's an interesting character that also was locked in at a prison here. You might remember John George Hay, the acid bath murderer. That was in London, you know. I'm not going to tell you the full story. I did try to tell you the full story once when we went to Wanderers Prison, where he was executed. But remember, the signal was not really good. But he was basically a horrible murderer in the 40s. He basically killed people for money, really, and he managed to kill quite a few because he would dispose of their bodies in Crawley, towards Gatwick area, in acid. But the thing is, he got caught eventually, and he wasn't very. I mean, although he was a smart guy, once he got caught, he actually told the police about all the other murders. But when he was in prison, he had been in prison down here in Lincoln because of fraud, nothing to do with the murders yet. But it is said that he was working at the Tin Smiths production or whatever in the prison. And he was, playing with acids for work, you know, for the workshop he had to do there. But it is said that already at the time he was asking his prison mates to find some rats or little mice so he could experiment with the acid. So interesting little detail. Now, this is the Chinese I mentioned earlier. You can see it's a restaurant today, but you can see it used to be a pub because I think it was called the Hare on Hunt. So you would have had an illustration of an hare down here. It's quite typical of the pubs, you know, to have this little plaque, to have an illustration of the name for the people that couldn't read properly. If I gave you a meeting at the Hare on Hunt, you could look at the sign. So nowadays it's a Chinese buffet, but that's where they had the inquest into the case of Sarah Clark, the lady that killed her 2 babies. Now that's going to be the end of the tour. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions about anything before we go. And thank you for coming today. It's always a pleasure to have so many of you on board. Now I'm going to jump on a train and get back down to London. Well, long journey because I've got a bit of weight in the middle of nowhere. Yes, it often starts with animals. Actually, remember at the beginning of the tour we were talking about Tom Otter, the one that has a lane named after him. Apparently he was also quite cruel to animals. So sadly, well, that's a behavior that's quite alarming, you know. If you see anyone with animal cruelty, it could lead to human murders, you know. Yeah. Thanks, Emma. Thanks everyone for coming today. It's always a pleasure to have you. If any of you drop me a little tip on PayPal or buy me a coffee, it's very much appreciated. I really rely on your generosity. You know, sometimes because I try to schedule a lot, I'm often worried that people might think, oh, she's doing a lot, she's probably doing well. No, you know, I do really hope for tips, you know, and it's really hard to get visibility on YouTube as well, to get a new audience. So if you can help with, you know, any other way, like dropping a comment, a hype, a like, sharing it really helps as well. Cool. Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Tish. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. Hopefully, I'll see most of you next Monday. So we've got Weston Supermare and we've got, the Clifton area. So we're going back to Bristol, but not the same part I did last year. You might remember I took you down to Bristol last May. So we won't see the same thing. We'll hang around the bridge area, where we also have a very interesting double murder, as well as some beautiful views over the river and the bridge. So that's something to look forward to next Monday. The Western Supermare one, I know it's a bit early for some of you in the US or in Canada, but just to be able to fit 2 in a day, I had to schedule it quite early. Thanks, Tish. Thanks everyone for coming today. And again, if any of you were completely new to me, if you've made it that far into the video, you might want to consider subscribing to make sure you see the next ones, because they're very easy to miss, those lives. And of course, you can always watch the replay, but it's much more fun to be able to interact in the chat. So make sure you subscribe and you hit the little notification bell. Cool. Thank you guys. Have a great evening or a great morning or a great lunch, a great life, whatever I can wish you. And I'll see you soon. Bye bye.